Me with my fiancé of almost 3 years about to marry am having serious doubts. Before I met my significant other, there had only been one love that ever gripped my heart, one that lingered long after the first spark had faded. It was the kind of love that imprints itself on your soul and leaves you wandering for years in its absence, hoping against reason that one day you might cross paths again. This was my holiday love, a brief yet intense romance that swept me off my feet when I was 16. It was a warm summer, the kind where every day seemed bathed in gold, and time felt like it stood still just for us. We met in the most serendipitous of ways, like something from a romance novel, a chance meeting, a collision of worlds. She was from across the ocean, 7,000 miles away, and it was as if fate itself had pulled us together for those fleeting 2 weeks. I don't remember much else from that summer besides her. She was my entire world in that brief, whirlwind romance, and for those 2 weeks, I felt as though we were the only two people in existence. She had this warmth about her, a light that I found myself irresistibly drawn to. The way she laughed, the way she looked at me with those deep, soulful eyes, I felt as though she saw through every mask, every layer, every pretense I'd ever worn. At 16, love was a wild, all-consuming fire, and she became my everything. For nearly 14 years, I was convinced, with unshakable certainty, that she was the love of my life. She was not just a person, but a promise of what love could be. But reality has its way of interfering, and our love was complicated by a distance I had not yet fully grasped. 7,000 miles lay between us. Not just a mere number, but a chasm separating our worlds. And after that summer, as abruptly as she had entered my life, she was gone. Disappeared without a trace, like a dream dissolving upon waking. I didn't know where she was or how to reach her. The silence that followed was like an endless echo of what could have been. In the years that followed, I couldn't shake her from my thoughts. She haunted me, a beautiful ghost that lingered in the back of my mind, and I became fixated on finding her again. Over the years, I made 8 trips to her country, each journey filled with equal parts excitement and dread. I would wander the streets, hoping to catch a glimpse of her face, wondering if I'd feel the same spark if we locked eyes again. But she remained elusive, a shadow I could never quite reach, no matter how much I searched. During those 8 trips, I experienced all the stages of hope, excitement, disappointment, and resignation. I remember one summer when I wandered the streets, feeling like a character in a tragic romance, hoping that fate might favor me with a single meeting. And every time I boarded a plane back home, I'd feel a small piece of myself crumble. But despite the unanswered questions and the miles of silence between us, I couldn't let her go. She had imprinted herself on my heart, and I was convinced that one day we would meet again, and everything would fall into place. Asterisk, asterisk, a childhood love that shaped me. Asterisk, asterisk. By the time I was 18, I found myself entering my first serious relationship. It was exciting, new, and in some ways, everything I thought I wanted at that age. Yet no matter how deeply I tried to dive into this new relationship, a part of me remained tethered to that summer love. My girlfriend at the time, my first serious partner, could never know that I had another love lingering in the background of my heart. A love that, despite being separated by years and distance, felt as real and potent as ever. As we built our relationship, I genuinely believed we could make it work. For nearly 4 years, I was committed to her, or at least I tried to be. But the specter of my lost love lingered, casting a shadow over every shared moment. Then, one day, the illusion of stability shattered. I discovered she had been cheating on me. The betrayal struck deep, cutting into every soft part of me that I had exposed to her. In a fit of impulsive immaturity, I reacted in the only way I knew how, by seeking revenge. I cheated back, thinking it would even the scales, that it would somehow balance the hurt I felt, but instead it warped something inside me. In the wake of that relationship, I found myself changed and not for the better. I became hardened, cynical, and detached. The thrill of betrayal had touched something in me, and rather than filling the wound, it festered. My new thought process was simple. If love could be so easily broken, then why care deeply? Why allow myself to be vulnerable again? From that point on, I resolved to never allow anyone to reach that part of me that could hurt so profoundly. Love, I convinced myself, was a fleeting illusion. It was better to remain at the surface, detached and impervious. Asterisk, asterisk. Trying to move forward, but unable to forget. Asterisk, asterisk. After that relationship, I went through a period of aimless wandering. A few casual flings, some shallow connections, nothing that penetrated beyond the surface. My heart had built walls I wasn't even aware of, and I couldn't bring myself to lower them. I didn't want to feel that pain again, and so I pushed everyone away before they could get close enough to inflict any real damage. But then I met another girl. She was different, or at least I convinced myself she was. Let's call her Cheaty Girl. I was 23, and I entered this new relationship with hope, with an almost desperate desire for something real. This time, I told myself, it would be different. I would start with a clean slate, bury the pain of my past, and dive into this love without reservation. I was determined to be the kind of partner who could be proud of the relationship we shared. Yet people around me weren't convinced. My friends, my family, they all warned me. She's not the one, they said, their voices filled with doubt. But I ignored them. Maybe it was my stubbornness or my pride, but I was determined to prove them wrong. Just 1 month into the relationship, I experienced a blow that was painfully familiar. One night, at a club, I watched her kiss my best friend. My heart and my confidence shattered in an instant. In those first moments of realization, every fiber of my being screamed to walk away, to take this as a sign. But once again, I was stubborn. I spent 3 agonizing days convincing myself and her that we could work past this. I allowed myself to believe her promises that she would change, that she would be better, and that we could move forward together. But deep down, something in me had already broken. Asterisk, asterisk. Reuniting with my holiday. Love, asterisk, asterisk. It was during this turbulent period, almost a year into my relationship with Cheaty Girl, that I stumbled upon something that would change the course of my life. Late one night, as I sat at my computer scrolling through endless profiles and social media feeds, I saw her name pop up. The name of my holiday love. My heart pounded in my chest as I sent her a request, my fingers trembling with anticipation and nerves. I sat there for nearly 24 hours, unable to sleep, waiting for her to accept. When she finally did, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me that I hadn't felt in years. 6. The start of a new me. The decision to move out was monumental for me. After months of hesitation, self-doubt, and battling between my heart and my head, I finally took the plunge. I packed my things, left the home I had shared with Safe Girl, and embarked on a journey of self-discovery and change. It turned out to be easier than I ever imagined. Once I took the first step, the rest seemed to follow with surprising ease. I vowed that I would leave behind not only the relationship, but the version of myself that had been stuck in an endless cycle of dishonesty, betrayal, and confusion. I was determined to become a better person, a person who could truly deserve the happiness I yearned for. When my significant other, my SO, learned that I had actually left, she could barely contain her excitement. Her joy was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, I felt my heart swell with a genuine happiness that wasn't marred by guilt or fear. We could finally be together, no longer held back by half-truths or old commitments. But as much as my heart was all in, my brain remained cautious. I knew the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. Trust, especially when broken, isn't something that mends overnight. I knew I would need to prove myself, to show her with actions, not just words, that I was serious about this new chapter in my life. We had long, heartfelt conversations, my SO and I, where I bared my soul and promised her my utmost sincerity. I was ready for a long period of distrust, a phase of rebuilding that would likely be painful at times, but I was prepared to put in the work, to earn her trust day by day. I wanted nothing more than to be the person I'd always aspired to be, someone honest, stable, and worthy of love. And so, with cautious optimism, we began our relationship. The first year was nothing short of magical. We were in a constant haze of joy, as if the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us wrapped up in our own universe. I felt a sense of respect for myself growing, something I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I wasn't hiding or deceiving. I was free, and in that freedom I found a renewed sense of purpose. Friends were skeptical, of course. They held on to the saying, once a cheater, always a cheater, and I couldn't blame them. But I was determined to prove them wrong. That year, I worked tirelessly on myself, pushing to grow beyond my past mistakes and to build a foundation I could be proud of. 7. Huge highs, deep lows. But as with most things in life, the euphoria didn't last forever. While the relationship was fantastic in many ways, it became increasingly turbulent. Our highs were beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Moments of pure, unfiltered happiness that seemed almost surreal. But the lows? They were equally intense, dark valleys that left me questioning myself and everything I had worked. The shadow of my past haunted us both. Every now and then, my SO would be overcome with suspicion, almost paranoid in her accusation. She questioned everything, suspecting me of deceit even when there was none to be found. I would apologize profusely, not only for the mistakes I had made with her, but also for things that were entirely beyond my control. Little things, things that seemed so trivial to me, would ignite her suspicion. For instance, I had deleted my Facebook years ago, but photos of Safe Girl and me still lingered in friends' albums. When my SO would stumble upon one of these, she would spiral into a rage. She would cry, scream, accuse me of things that hadn't even crossed my mind. It was exhausting, to say the least, But I felt that this was part of my journey. I told myself that this was the price I had to pay to make up for my mistakes. After all, I had been the one to break trust in the first place. Each time she calmed down, she would apologize and tell me she didn't understand why she got so angry, that she didn't want to feel that way. These confessions gave me hope that things could improve, and soon enough, we'd find ourselves back in our happy place, reaching new peaks of joy that made all the struggles seem worth it. I tried to reassure her in every way I could. I would bring her flowers every month, a small gesture to remind her of my commitment. I started working from home 90% of the time, thinking that my constant presence would ease her worries. After all, she would know that I wasn't out meeting other women or doing anything to betray her trust. I reassured myself constantly, convincing myself that this was just a phase and that, in time, the lows would disappear. I chose not to share these struggles with friends or family. I didn't want them to misunderstand her or think poorly of her. I was confident that one day we'd reach a place of stability and peace. 8. I saw change but mistook it for progression. Gradually, the focus of our fights shifted. Where they had once been predominantly about Safe Girl, they began to revolve around other issues. The arguments were still vicious and draining, with my SO accusing me of dishonesty, of being the same person I had once been. Yet I could sense a shift. After each fight, we would talk things through and reach a resolution, convincing ourselves that we were moving forward. The highs that followed each argument were as intense as ever, making me feel that these struggles were worth it. The greatest relief came from knowing I no longer had anything to hide. I could be open with her, and that sense of freedom was exhilarating. Each day, I felt a little bit more like the person I wanted to be. I reasoned with myself, convincing myself that these fights were simply part of the journey. After all, every relationship had its challenges, and ours was no different. I truly believed that, with patience and understanding, we would make it through these rough patches. I saw my SO as the person I wanted to spend my life with, the person I could imagine building a future with. I wanted children with, a family, a life built on the foundation we had struggled so hard to create. So, 1.5 years into our relationship, I decided to propose. We were planning a big American road trip, a chance to explore new places together and deepen our bond. It felt like the perfect moment to make my intentions. I proposed to her, and in that moment, I was as happy as I'd ever been. 9. Engagement peak and a year of highs and lows. Some might say I proposed out of a desire to solidify my love, to prove to her and the world that I was committed. But that wasn't it. I genuinely wanted to marry her, to spend my life. In my heart, I believed her to be my soulmate, even if my brain remained skeptical of such notions. I loved her truly, and believed that this commitment would bring us the stability we both longed for. However, that engagement high was an unsustainable peak, and it became the bar against which everything that followed would be measured. Over the next 1.5 years, we continued to experience the same cycles of happiness and despair. The fights persisted, often ignited by the smallest of actions. If I were working on my laptop and happened to switch tabs as she approached, she would demand to know what I was hiding. Was I chatting with someone? Why was I being so secretive? These accusations stung deeply, for I had reached a point where I would never dream of betraying her trust. In response, I became increasingly cautious, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her suspicion. I avoided going out with friends or doing anything that might make her feel insecure. Over time, I started withdrawing from anything that could be seen as suspicious. But this constant vigilance left me feeling trapped, unable to move freely without second-guessing every act. I became hyper-aware of my every movement, always trying to anticipate what might set her off. And yet, I didn't resent her. I understood that this was her way of coping with her own fears, her own insecurities. I knew she loved me fiercely, and that her jealousy was a symptom of that love, albeit a destructive. I convinced myself that if I loved her enough, if I remained patient, things would get better. 11. Hyperjealousy. The end of April brought a new challenge into our already delicate balance. An office manager, a woman in her early 30s, joined the firm where I worked. She had an outgoing and spontaneous personality, the kind of person who lights up a room and easily connects with everyone around her. Knowing that I would be seeing her regularly as a coworker, I casually mentioned her to my SO. I wanted to be transparent. If I didn't mention her presence, it would seem strange, especially if she heard about her through a third party. Besides, the office manager's friendly demeanor meant she was quick to add all her colleagues on social media, myself included. To me, it was harmless, just an aspect of modern office culture. But I underestimated how it would appear to my SO. A few weeks later in May, our firm hosted a barbecue. It was a casual event, a chance for everyone to let loose and socialize outside the rigid structure of the workday. I brought my SO along, genuinely excited for her to meet my colleagues. For once, this was a group of people who knew me as a faithful partner, unburdened by the ghosts of past relationships. I was eager for my SO to meet them, to see that part of my life, and I thought it might even reassure her to be around people who saw our relationship in a purely positive light. The evening went splendidly. At least I thought so. My SO met everyone, engaged in conversations, and even seemed to enjoy herself. We talked openly about our upcoming wedding, and I could tell she was happy to see me in this professional space. But all of that came crashing down once we got. No sooner had we closed the door than she confronted me, her face a mixture of anger and betrayal. She accused the office manager of flirting with, and no matter how much I tried to reassure her, nothing seemed to break through her jealousy. I explained that I hadn't seen anything flirty in her behavior, that she was just being friendly, but my words only seemed to make things worse. From that moment on, the office manager became a trigger. Any mention of her, however casual, ignited my SO's jealousy. She would bring her up in arguments, expressing anger and resentment, as if I had done something wrong merely by being in her presence. Her accusations grew intense, and once or twice, she even slapped me in the heat of her anger. I told her in no uncertain terms that this behavior was unacceptable, that we couldn't continue this way. But each time we fought, her jealousy would flare up again, and she'd lash out, only to apologize later with promises to change, and I would forgive her, desperately hoping we could move past it. I found myself torn between love and an increasingly painful reality. On the one hand, I loved this woman with a depth that sometimes surprised even me. The moments of joy and tenderness we shared felt worth any struggle. But these episodes of jealousy left me feeling as though I were living in a pressure cooker, constantly on edge, worried that any small act might set off a new round of accusations. As much as I wanted to feel proud of the changes I had made in my life, her jealousy eroded my confidence, making me feel like I could never be enough. When we argued, she had a way of spinning things, of making me feel as if I was at fault, even when I wasn't. And if she felt cornered or couldn't justify her accusations, she would remind me of my past, accusing me of using smooth talk to manipulate her, as I once had in other relationships. It was as if my past would forever be a shadow hanging over us, a constant reminder that, in her eyes, I was still that same unfaithful person, no matter how much I had changed. 12. Bachelor party. Last month, in what should have been a celebration of our upcoming marriage, my friends organized a bachelor party weekend. We planned a simple, fun escape, something to mark the milestone without straying into the cliches of bachelor parties. 6 of my closest friends, men who had known me since childhood, put together a trip. My SO's bridesmaids, meanwhile, organized a similar event for her in another city. Since we had always been inseparable, spending a night apart felt odd, and we agreed to stay in touch each day, just to keep that connection alive. The weeks leading up to the bachelor weekend had been a whirlwind of work and stress. Between my 4 days at the firm, the responsibilities of my own business, and a freelance job, I felt like I was constantly racing against the clock. I barely had time to think about the bachelor weekend itself, and when my friends arrived the night before, I was still glued to my laptop, trying to get ahead on work so I could fully disconnect. My friends could see my stress and frustration, and they came up with a plan to help me unwind. They decided I would surrender my phone for the weekend. They'd control when I got it back, ensuring I'd truly step away from work and worries. I was hesitant at first, but I eventually agreed, thinking it might actually be a relief to disconnect. The first hiccup came almost immediately. One of my friends was dating one of my SO's bridesmaids, and news of my phone restrictions spread quickly. My SO initially laughed it off, telling her friends she couldn't imagine me going without contact for the whole weekend. But through a series of misunderstandings, she began to worry that I intended to avoid contact with her entirely. Messages flew back and forth, and one of the bridesmaids texted a friend of mine, claiming we were ruining her weekend by cutting off contact. By the time I called her to reassure her, the tension had already flared. We argued for nearly an hour, but once the air cleared, I could finally relax. My first night with my friends was incredible. I felt free and happy, unburdened by the doubts and anxieties that had plagued me recently. As I lay in bed that night, I felt proud. Proud that I hadn't given in to temptations. Proud that I had stayed faithful, and proud of the life I was trying to build. The following day, things took a turn. After a relaxing afternoon with my friends, we went for a foot and back massage. That evening, around 9, I stepped outside the restaurant to call my SO, wanting to keep the promise we had made to check in daily. I casually mentioned the massage, not thinking anything of it. Her reaction was immediate. She asked incredulously, "A massage?" Before I could explain, she hung up. I tried calling back, desperate to reassure her that there was nothing inappropriate, but each attempt ended the same way. Her anger, suspicion, and accusations sent my heart into a spiral of anxiety. The conversation spiraled into another argument, one that lasted long after I returned to the table, unable to finish my meal. My friends noticed my mood, and when I finally broke down and told them what had happened, they were stunned. They had always seen me as the confident one, the one who had it all together. Yet here I was, barely able to keep myself composed as I confessed the depth of my struggles with my SO. It was the first time I had ever shared the truth of my relationship with anyone, and as I spoke, the emotional weight of it all came crashing down. My brother and cousin walked me back to the hotel, and as I cried, I felt both relieved and raw, as if a wound I had hidden for years had finally been exposed. Back at the hotel, my friends pulled me aside again, urging me to seek professional help, to consider counseling before the wedding. Their concern was genuine, and their advice resonated deeply. I had been carrying this burden alone for so long that hearing their perspective opened my eyes to how unhealthy things had become. I called my SO, and when she heard me crying, she seemed to soften. She sounded worried, even compassionate, and I allowed myself to hope that this conversation might finally lead to understanding. I shared everything I had told my friends, explaining my pain and my fears, and for a moment it seemed like we were truly connecting. But then, as if some invisible switch had flipped, her anger resurfaced. She accused me of trying to manipulate her, of playing the victim. It was like a knife to my heart, and once again, she ended the call. I returned to my friends, shaken and uncertain. We went out that night, but I was barely present, haunted by the growing realization that no matter what I did, her mistrust might never go away. As I lay in bed later that night, my mind raced, questioning every choice, every promise, every step that had led us here. When I returned home the next day, I had resolved to finally have a serious conversation with her. I knew that if we had any hope of a future together, we needed to confront these issues head on. Her jealousy, my guilt, and our communication problems had built a wall between us, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending everything was okay. I loved her with everything I had. But for the first time, I was beginning to wonder if that love would be enough to carry us through. 13. The last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I finally gathered the courage to sit down with my SO and have an open, honest conversation about our relationship. I told her how deeply I wanted things to work between us and expressed my willingness to confront the issues we'd been pushing aside for so long. To my relief, she listened, nodding in agreement, and for a moment I felt as if we'd turned a corner. We promised each other that we'd work on things, and it was one of those passionate highs that had once felt unshakable. In that moment, it seemed as if everything was finally going to be okay. But the tranquility didn't last. Just a few days after our talk, the arguments crept back in, now more frequent than ever. It seemed that any slight misstep on my part, something as simple as coming home a few minutes late or accidentally leaving my phone in another room, triggered accusation. More often than not, the name of the office manager was brought up, her presence a lingering shadow between us. My SO would question every interaction I had at work, suspecting that I was hiding things from her or lying about my true intentions. I tried in vain to reassure her, reminding her of the commitment I had made to be honest and faithful, but she dismissed my reassurances, saying her jealousy was simply proof of how much she loved. When I pointed out that her jealousy was excessive, she insisted it was because she cared so deeply, and that my lack of jealousy meant I didn't feel the same. I didn't have the heart to tell her how much her words hurt, how her accusations left me feeling as though I would never be enough, no matter how much I tried to change. Adding to the tension was the looming deadline of our wedding, scheduled for next week. The weight of last-minute arrangements, the pressure to have everything go perfectly, only intensified the strain between us. And today, in a fit of frustration, she told me she couldn't imagine marrying someone like me. Her words hit like a hammer, a painful reminder of the doubts she still harbored about. I looked at her, feeling both anger and heartbreak, and for the first time, I told her bluntly that she was pushing me to the brink. That night, I found myself standing in the kitchen, trying to calm my thoughts over a cigarette. I opened my phone and began searching for articles on premarital stress, desperate for something that could explain what was happening. I stumbled upon an article about toxic relationship patterns, and as I read, a knot formed in my stomach. Out of the 6 toxic signs listed, 5 of them eerily mirrored our relationship. I felt as if I were reading a checklist of every hurt, every doubt, every fear that had plagued me for the past 3 years. I decided to write everything down, pouring out my story in a desperate attempt to make sense of it all. I realized how much I loved her, despite everything. I acknowledged that, from my side, the story might paint her in a negative light, but I know she's more than these moments of anger and jealousy. She has qualities that have captivated me from the beginning, qualities that make me fall in love with her all over again. I don't believe I'm the same person I was 3 years ago, the man who ran from problems rather than facing them. I'm proud of who I've become, proud that I'm trying to be a good partner, a stable, trustworthy man. Yet I'm scared. I'm scared that no matter what I do, I'll never live up to her expectations. I'm scared that her jealousy, her need to control, is something that won't just fade away with time. There have been moments when she acknowledged her behavior, even suggesting therapy, but each time things improved temporarily, we decided not to pursue it. After all, when we're at our best, everything feels right. But the lows keep coming. and I'm beginning to wonder if love alone will ever be enough. With our wedding almost fully paid for and guests ready to attend, I feel trapped. The emotional toll of the relationship, combined with the financial stress and my overloaded work schedule, has left me physically and mentally drained. I've started experiencing physical symptoms, rashes, pains, signs that my body is reacting to the pressure I'm. Every day feels like I'm walking on eggshells, navigating a maze of her doubts, my guilt, and an endless cycle of accusations. I've tried to understand her behavior, tracing it back to her childhood. She once shared that her parents had fought constantly, creating a volatile environment that left scars she's still struggling with. I want to be the one who helps her heal, but each time she calls me a liar or a cheat, my resolve weakens. I find myself feeling guilty, as if my past mistakes are the reason for her pain. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if this is karma, punishment for my own betrayals and the hurt I've caused others. There have been days when I've fantasized about running away from this life, driving off without looking back. I even thought, during one of my lowest points, about simply crashing my car, ending the turmoil once and for all. It's frightening to admit that the pain has driven me to such thoughts. But putting these feelings into words brings a sense of release. Writing it out, at 4 in the morning, has helped to lift the weight, if only a little. In my heart, I know I'm a good person. I know I've changed, that I've worked to become someone worthy of love and trust. But as much as I love her, I'm beginning to question whether I'm capable of withstanding this. I've done everything in my power to show her that I'm committed, that I want a future with her. But I can't shake the feeling that her behavior, no matter how much it might stem from past pain, is slowly pulling us apart. With the wedding just days away, I'm at a crossroads. I want nothing more than to spend my life with her, to build a future and a family. But I can't ignore the toll this is taking on my soul, the way it's eroding my self-worth and sense of peace. I'm terrified of the possibility that, after everything we've been through, our love might not be enough to sustain us. I know I have to make a choice, and the weight of it hangs heavy in the air.